So let me get that going. Okay. So, oh, Jim just showed up. Hey, Jim, welcome.
Hey,
I just,
got the recording?
yeah, I did.
Okay.
Oh, well. Okay. So welcome everybody to the education system for Tuesday, April 28th. I put together an agenda here. Let me share my screen here and we can figure out how we want to proceed for today. So, oh boy, someone's calling me on Discord. Okay. Let's see here.
It's Patrick, of course.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So let's see. Oh, so first thing I want to mention, Jim, our session from last week is unlisted on YouTube. Is that how we want to do that? The very first one was available to the public, but the one from last week is unlisted.
It's uncertain. Generally, it was determined that people wanted these unlisted. Now,
It was okay.
If we have, when we have a collab thing, I often will list it.
Right.
But if it's an RChain thing, by default, it would be unlisted.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to bring that up because I wasn't sure what was decided. So we'll leave it as is for now.
We can decide anything as of today. I mean, this was quite some time ago that
Oh, okay.
Process was determined.
Yeah, we can list videos from this series, right?
Yeah, I think the education series probably should be listed.
Yeah, the easier access, if the goal is to bring people into the community and provide them education materials, we want to make it easy for them to get to it. So if it's unlisted, then that's just another barrier.
Yeah, I agree.
So last week, okay, so let me just kind of talk about what's on the agenda and we can decide where we want to go. So last week we were Tomislav, you were reviewing IntelliJ and debugging, and I put on here IntelliJ again because I think that there may have been some other things that you wanted to cover. But let me just go through the list here. Then I have talk about the code in RChain project. I guess that came up, and then and then in the Discord channel, Arthur, thank you for putting in your iterations that you kind of work through. So then we have that, and I just kind of copied and pasted into the notes. So there's the three items: the IntelliJ review. Oh, so talk about the RChain code. I guess it's essentially the code base. Just kind of working through that, which is a pretty big endeavor. And then Arthur's what he's gone through. I don't know if any one of those probably could fill up the whole hour. But any thoughts? How do people feel?
So maybe we can start with what Arthur had, his presentation, what he is doing with like addition stuff to Arnold.
Okay. Arthur, are you? Let's see here. How do you feel about that, Arthur? Would you want to kind of go through what your adventures into RChain have been like?
Yeah.
Okay. And if you need to share your screen here, I can stop sharing my screen if it'll.
Yeah, just tell me when you can see my screen.
Okay, not yet.
Not yet.
RChain education for today.
I think I'm sharing.
So let's see here. there's the green button in the Zoom control panel. It says share screen. You click on that, and then you share the screen in Zoom. There. Okay. There must be some delay. Yep.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to give you some context, you know, in terms of why am I looking at RChain. So, you know, ultimately I'm interested in track and trace and supply chain and financial applications. And, you know, this is just an example of IBM using Hyperledger to do tracing for Walmart in their supply chain. So they can, for example, take, you know, trace E. coli problems in vegetables back to the farm in 2 minutes as opposed to 2 days. But, you know, this site, for example, is IBM providing a closed blockchain system because they haven't really figured out privacy with respect to trust. And they also, if you want to run your a contract, a DApp, then you have to host your own node, right? So, but because they don't have on Hyperledger a language like Rholang with a VM, which gives you the ability to execute in untrusted environments, right? So, but ultimately, you know, the motivation is to you know, think along the lines of track and trace and how do you get privacy and trust. So that kind of led me to, you know, looking at all the zero knowledge technologies, and you know, the way to kind of ease your way in to how we use zero knowledge and do publicly verifiable contracts is, you know, this sealed bid auction, for example. So this sealed bid auction protocol uses bulletproofs, and it basically uses bulletproofs to take you through a protocol where you, you know, an auctioneer, bidders, and you have a smart contract. And then what happens is that when you initiate the auction, you invite bidders to submit bids, and this is a highest bid winner. Then what the bidders do is they submit Pedersen commitments to a particular value, X, and a random number. Then the auctioneer will close the auction, and then all the bidders submit openings. So they actually give you the X and the R. And the X and an R is then used to create a basically an ordering, and then to figure out the winner, and then to prove that that ordering is correct. And you do all of this without actually revealing the X and the R. All the stuff is on the blockchain, and then you can verify that the auction is correct by executing another proof. So the way you kind of make this happen is that you've got to find a library for doing you know, range proofs, right? Range proofs. And
sorry, can I just ask you on this auction that you were mentioning, voting should be easier than that, right?
Yes. Well, yeah. Yes. I think it has the same characteristics. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
So, you know, so the goal here is how do you do trust? In the supply chain, it's a little inverted to the you know, the problems that you have with crypto. So, for example, with cryptocurrency, you add privacy so that you can't trace backwards. But in the supply chain, you want privacy, but you still want to be able to trace backwards. Otherwise, you won't be able to trace back to the farm. But when you do tracing, you want to make sure that competitors can't see, you know, what everyone else is doing, right? I mean, you can't. You know, so you need different characteristics, but you still need the privacy aspect, right? So bulletproofs, you know, this bulletproof library is, you know, it's written in Rust, so it's one of the characteristics. It gives you two things. First of all, it gives you range proofs, and then it also gives you arithmetic circuits. Because when you have different types of auctions, you can have highest bid, lowest bid. You can have vicary, where you do, you know, highest bidder, but you pay the second highest bid price. But then you can also come up with a calculation of a bid based on a number of characteristics, and then you use arithmetic circuits to actually prove that that calculation was correct, right? And this library, you know, kind of gives you those two things. The question then is, well, you know, how do you use a library like this Rust library, both in the server, on the node, and also up in the on the web app, right? So you can write a web app that converts Rust into WebAssembly, and then you can actually use this library to do the Pedersen commitments, which is what the bidders need to submit. And then there's also a requirement that when you submit the openings, you need to be able to encrypt those with the public key of the auctioneer, and then you send that data to the bid and store that encrypted. But then you need to decrypt it in order to kind of calculate the winner, right? So it's not just this library that you need. You also need another library for doing the encryption and decryption of the openings. And typically you can find a Rust library. So it then becomes, well, how do you take a Rust library and integrate it with RChain so that you can use it both for apps and for for dApps, right? That's kind of the context. So what I did is that, as I said, I tried to actually initially have a Rust library and then have a JNR assembly and then use that from a Rholang extension, and I got that to work, but it's a lot of pain, and you have to work. JNR is painful. But you have to work with three kind of systems. One is, when you do Javan, you're working with Maven, and it's just, so you've got three systems. You've got Cargo, Maven, SBD, 3 build systems, 3 languages. It becomes a little complicated, but it is possible to do. Then, Tomislav I saw what he did with the HTTP extension, and I thought that was a much easier way to go, because then we can use a JSON API. So, I kind of wrote a quick Rust server using Rocket, and just came up with the fundamental things that I needed for the APIs. So basically I needed to make commitments, I needed to do openings, range proofs, range verifications, figure out the highest, and then do the verifications of the highest. And all of these, little snippets kind of follow the same protocol, where you need to get in JSON data. You need to basically unwrap the JSON data into maps, and then you need to, implement the protocol, right? So this gets the commitments from the data, and it's basically, this unwraps the commitments. Each commitment is 32 bytes, and then you basically get the proof, and then you use this notion where you create a bulletproof. You use this thing called a Merlin transcript, which gives you the Fiat Shamir method of making zero knowledge proofs non-interactive, and then you pretty much just call this proof. And then you get the proof, and it either passes or fails, right? And each one of these protocols has got these little snippets for you to pretty much use range proofs, or to use arithmetic circuits in order to create what is essentially bytes, which will give you proofs and verifications and commitments. So basically, what I do then is that if if I'm developing locally, then I pretty much just run this locally on a local node, and then I can use it using the Visual Studio experience from Thomas that I'll show you now. Or but then what I can also do is that I've got a 2-node chain on Azure, so that I can basically deploy to VMs, and then have this working on a blockchain that is hosted. Okay, so I get this thing running, and then what I do is, I had to extend RNode, because RNode didn't have, well, I extended it in 2 places, right? I extended it with the HTTP feature, and then I also extended it because I needed to get bytes to hex, so that I could call this API. Right, the way RChain RChain encrypts, well, the way that RChain puts hexadecimal in JSON is not actually JSON format, because JSON accepts strings right now. I think a future iteration of JSON will accept hexadecimal bytes, but it isn't right now. So I needed hex to bytes. So I added that to the node as well. So there was an extension component with adding it to the node, and then building Docker, and also building Debian DPKs. Debian DPK so I could deploy to the node, and then Docker so that I could use it in the VS Code extension from Tomislav, right? So then, you know, so I got it, all that done, and now we're moving over to the contract. And the contract then, you know, like I said in my, my feedback was, the biggest problem was kind of just figuring out, you know, style in terms of, you know, I really just want a JSON app, right? Obviously, I'm getting JSON in, right? If I'm going to start the auction, I'm going to give a bit of JSON code. So I'll go down to my tests, you know, so, I mean, I think we all have to, you know, pretty much put our tests into, you know, into the code. And then I have, you know, I have a build script, which basically cuts this out so that I can deploy it. But, you know, this, for example, is, you know, I'm going to start the auction. This is the auctioneer, the seller. This is what I'm selling. You know, and it would be nice to not mix in the tests with the contract, but, you know, this works well right now. But, you know, it's JSON in, and then when I get out, what I get out is also JSON, right? So I get stuff out that's also JSON, and then I can follow on to execute the next test and the next test as I follow through for the protocol. So kind of just getting the contract and the test separated would be nice, but you know, if things work, then I'm very happy. Basically, the API, you know, it was, you know, I went back, you know, sometimes back and forth, you know, sometimes this is called ACK in examples. You know, sometimes you have channel, and sometimes you don't. So you kind of, you know, you bounce around a lot. Sometimes there's you know, an ampersand in the parameter list. Sometimes it's not there. So you kind of bounce around a little bit trying to figure out, you know, what the style is for how you really want to, you know, work with this. You know, using the map from RNode is really good. In any case, I came up with a style where, you know, kind of the contract names were pretty much, you know, like start auction, close bid. You can see those here. And then my stores, I put store at the end. And then I have an auction store and a bid store. And these are basically just maps, so that I can just put JSON in there. So this is all the auctions. This is all the stores, all the bids. And basically this will handle all auctions, right? So anyone who wants to create a auction will start an auction and pass in this data. Now, what I haven't got here yet is, for example, you need to authorize with respect to when I start an auction, I provide the you know, the public keys of the bidders, and I need to just verify that those bidders are bidding on the correct auction, right? But yeah, so typically you basically got to go through a protocol. You can get auctions and get bids, right? So then, you know, so I said, okay, I'm going to do JSON store. I'm going to have JSON on the input, and I'm going to have JSON in the response. And then, you know, I kind of went through the style of saying, when I say open bid, so this always has an ampersand. I then, you know, verify the input of the data. And then the next problem that I kind of not 100% sure of, and I think I'll show it up here a bit, maybe further down on a more public one. You know, so you're never quite sure. Like I've got a new, and I introduce a new name here, but then I also have a new name here, and I'm not quite sure if, you know, every time you do a new, you get a deeper nesting. You're not sure if you should just put all your names at the top so that you don't get nesting, or whether you should have nesting, and this is fine. You know,
this is mostly because you want to sequentialize some execution, right?
Yeah.
Because you're probably creating name to have like a return channel, and then you do something, and then again you create a new name as a return channel, and then listen for that name, right?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much you know, you got inputs, and then you have to get your you have to get your data, and then you have to do something with it, right? So that, you know, I've got to I've got to get the input, I've got to get the, you know, the metadata store. I think somewhere along here, there's the auction store. So I've got data on the input, then I have to get my store. You know, so I get the auction store here, and then I call out to the crypto server, right? So I call out to the crypto server, do the verification here, for example, and then I get back the response, and then I go through, you know, a whole bunch of if conditions in order to figure out what the response should be. And I just use HTTP status codes for the response to the contract, right? And I, you know, I do HTTP status codes because I know that I'm going to have a web app that's going to talk to this DApp, right? And you know, and the web app's going to, you know, for example, right now, you know, this bid must be a proof that will give me the Pedersen commitment of the value plus the proof that that value is greater than 0, right? So you know, those hashes need to be calculated by the web app and passed in. You know, the thing that I try to look at is that, for example, here's the auction ID, and then what I need to do is I need to get that auction from the auction store. You know, and I've got this code that checks if it contains it, and then, you know, gets the status. And I try to use the patterns in a continuation over here, but I wasn't able to put the auction ID into the pattern to say, you know, I want this auction, but I want to use, you know, this auction ID as part of the pattern. And it doesn't seem to do that, right? And what I didn't want to do is that I didn't want to iterate through a whole bunch of auctions or through a whole bunch of bids in order to find that auction or the bid in the store. So then I was kind of saying, well, is it the right way to store all the auctions in one map? You know, or should the auctions be stored as separate key value pairs in LNDB?
So you can use something that we are using in registry and also in Revolt, 3-hash map.
Okay.
This map is like immutable map, but you can see it as not only one reference to the whole map, right? You have at the leaves you have Rholang maps, but all the other structure is created from like from different unforgeable names. So when you're updating one branch, this is totally different reference from other branches.
Okay.
So if you take a look in the registry, you can see this 3-hash map, and it's easy to use because it's almost the same interface like a normal map.
Okay, and there, I mean, you know, I'll look at that again because you see, I've been also asking about Merkle trees, because if you don't have Merkle trees as part of your language, then it's very hard to make your keys private, right? You got to have methods of proving membership of a Merkle tree, as opposed to actually providing a actual key. So but that's just another you know, technique that is used to give you privacy. You know, some way of getting that. Okay, so you know, I mean, I think, you know, I mean, you know, pretty much the tool's great for, where am I? You know, I make modifications, I save, and you know, pretty much it's where I am right now. The part that I was talking to Tomislav about is that, you know, at this point I'm trying to say, okay, the hex to bytes. So this over here is, let me just, sorry, bytes to hex. So, you know, what I needed to do was iterate through my openings to do the final proof of the highest, and I needed to basically do this part where I, took the key and I turned it into hex. And this function is what I have now added to our node. And now I'll just been working through these iterations of getting, either Visual Studio code to work with Scala, or getting IntelliJ to work with Scala and get the pull request done, so that so we can I can submit a pull request to the dev branch in RChain, and I'll kind of work on that, but it isn't really clear what that process is. But it'll be nice to have, so that we can kind of add more stuff, right? I mean, I know Jim wants to add string functions, and I think there'll probably be stuff that I want to add as well. Although I would like to, for example, be able to talk about how we are able to, for example, call libraries. There's been a number of proposals on how to do that, but the key thing for us is that we really do need to be able to get a zero knowledge security layer with RChain. We really do need to be able to work with with libraries that are not written in Scala, right?
Yeah. So we have a document that is written maybe a year ago, or maybe more, about FFI and how this is like envisioned to work. I can find out the link and post later. And
I read that, Thomas, but the problem with that is that FFI will need the JNR bridge if you have a Rust library.
Yeah. I wanted to say that they are mentioning loading jars directly inside the Rholang, and right. Yeah, so this is like another approach, which it's maybe much easier.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to ask you. So you're creating requests from Rholang, but you don't need to accept requests inside the Rholang, right? You don't have HTTP server inside the Rholang.
Right now, I hosted, right now I host this on the same node, but it's not hosted as a process in Rholang, right?
Yeah. So, okay. So your HTTP server, Rust HTTP server is doing all of the crypto work. Yes. And from Rholang, you are calling your HTTP endpoints.
Yeah. So
the same
host, right?
Yeah, and the same endpoints you can use from client and do the same calculations.
Yeah.
Nice. So this key, your extension to bytes to hex, this key is byte array, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a byte array. Yeah.
So currently we have some method bytes to UTF-8, right, or something like that.
Yeah. I've got this implemented. It's a slight difference to the hex 2 bytes, right? It's just the inverse of it. So it wasn't a problem to do. But I mean, I think the thing is that there's a whole bunch of these little things that can be done, and if we can make it a little easier to do, we'll be able to,
So this is a zero knowledge proof oracle that you've created here that doesn't have any state associated with it?
No state, no. Nope, it just performs a cryptographic function.
Sweet.
I mean, yeah. I mean, an oracle is, well, there's different in the zero knowledge world, an oracle is like a source of truth of data, right? So it's a little different from an off-chain agent in blockchain.
Yeah.
And you think of that as part of the Rholang that is not on the blockchain, right? Calling HTTP from the blockchain, we need this separation. We need to say, this part of the Rholang will not work on the blockchain, right? It doesn't make sense. So did you think about this connection between blockchain and evaluator part?
Why wouldn't this work on the blockchain? I mean, if there's no state in the app, then everybody should get the same answer.
I think this should work on the blockchain. It's just that HTTP was the easiest way to get me there. You know, if this was you know, a socket or a process with, you know, if this service was hosted as a process using, you know, system daemon, then that's fine. I mean, I don't mind what it is. I'm just asking for like a JSON API to call something that I can host, right?
I see. I
And
see.
I only have to host it because of the mismatch in languages, right? It's only the language mismatch that is causing this problem.
Oh yeah, yeah, I see. I see. So theoretically, you know, we can run different nodes, different versions of nodes where this contract on one node is calling HTTP, and on another node is calling I don't know.
Right. I mean,
some different way to do the same data.
let's look at this. This is, for example, here I call the catch hash function, right? I mean, this has been implemented by calling out to a C library via a Java bridge. Okay, but there's no difference between this hash and me needing to you know, basically
your Rust.
call a similar function. No, it's.
I'm more thinking about the interface. So maybe we don't want to say, oh, this is HTTP.
Right.
I'm thinking more like this is this kind of library, and you as a validator or you as an node operator, you can say, oh, on my node this works with HTTP, or some another can say, you know, some different way. Like you can have like plugins that you can attach to node.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think there's different use cases, but I mean, the key thing for me was that you know, from a Rholang perspective, you know, I wanted something like this, right? That's what I wanted from the language. What I got was having to call an HTTP post. So, you know, it's not that I wanted that. It's that was the you know, doing this. Yeah, it's not a whole bunch extra, but doing this, I had to do this because I couldn't get this easily. You know, getting this using a bridge to a Rust library, because there's two parts. First of all, you have to, you know, host the Rust package somewhere as part of the build system. Then you also have to take the you know, the Maven bridge package and host that somewhere. And in RChain, you have a store somewhere to host it. So now you've got, you know, two packages that you pull down as part of the build system. You got to you know, have repos for each of them. You got to build them, use different build systems, put them up to the package stores, and then you got to pull them down and then get them to work, right? You know, this way was just less sticky, but
yeah. I mean, the question is, if you're running, if we have this additional stuff, when you are running node, you need to run all of the Rust stuff, right? Your Rust server, and which complicates things. So I'm not sure how to put all these things in one place.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, I think that's pretty much.
That's a good question.
Yeah. I pretty much this is pretty much all I have right now. Right. You know, the next step for me was to deploy this this contract. So, you know, I've got a bit of build script which basically removes out the junk and, you know, ends up with a you know, with a contract, and this contract can now be deployed. And you know, the next, it's a little sticky because I have to go learn how to do it. But you know, what is the best way of deploying, right? Is it the TypeScript library that I use and call from node and then deploy, and that's kind of the route that I'm taking, but to get this deployed. And then the next thing I do is flip over to writing the app, which uses the Rust library as WebAssembly in order to call the contract.
So when you say you're not sure how to deploy, what exactly do you mean?
Well, there's a number of different approaches, right? There seems to be I think there's a Python library, and I think there's a
You think about the client library to do the communication.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just not sure which is the recommended or the best practice for deploying right now.
Yeah, in essence, you need to generate from protobuf. You need to generate the service, and this is not always easy.
Yeah, and then and particularly for me, right? I've got a process where I use key vaults in on Azure, and I had to work through all the automation to deploy multiple nodes. But as you deploy, they they kind of add their passwords, and then also the validator, public and private keys. So the deployment needs to pull out these things from Key Vault and then use them for deployment. That's a little bit sticky in terms of languages. What language do you use so that you can actually do this stuff?
Well, we've been, most of the stuff that's been done is using the RChain, right?
Oh, really? Okay, great.
Yeah, for now, JavaScript and Python are the mostly used.
What we have is the render contract template in Python, which lets you put variables into your contracts. So there, I don't think we have a templating system like that in JavaScript yet.
Okay. Great. Well, that's the next thing I'll be looking at after I get the pull request done.
Cool. Yeah. We can work on that. Yeah, definitely. And one other way of deploying is also in the same way you created connection to Rust. We can have connection to Casper to create to make a deploy. Right? That would be useful because you can have Rholang code and you can directly take one part of this code and deploy it. For me, that would be very nice because then you have everything in Rholang. You don't need like special client library.
Yeah.
Especially with your crypto stuff, this is great.
Yeah. So the other part that I think we knew about was, I've kind of, this is where I get the URL for the server, and there's a mismatch, with the, I think Thomas, we did an issue on that is that if you can't pass in parameters to the Docker, then the call for localhost when you're in Docker is using host Docker internal. And when you're not in Docker, then you have a different API. Whoops. So that's one difference between the local dev and the host. The other one is that this block data blocks. This block data blocks when you're not on chain, right? It just stops, and that's why I was asking for a wait function so that you could time out. And I noticed that in some other people are interested in, for example, business process notation and not having a wait so that you can time out on something is going to pretty much stop a whole bunch of workflow implementations. But if I had something that waited, that timed out, if you blocked on here, then I would basically just do the the local host one.
Yeah. So you need a way to test to test inside the Rholang. Do you have this this feature or not? Right. Something like that.
Something like that might be fun, or to do a mock of it. I mean, I'm just mocking it here, right? Here, I just pass in mock data. So for anything that that blocks if you're not on validating node is something that would help. It's not the end of the world. I mean, you can build tools to kind of, you know, do this type of stuff, right?
Yeah, but Jim mentioned the same thing. If you have something that is not available, it is available only in the blockchain, it would be nice maybe if we can create some Rholang code that is doing the same thing. So you can say, oh, I don't have this here, but you know, I have some replacement code.
Yes, I can ask you a question as well. Is that in the Casper folder, there's a whole bunch of import statements and export statements in Rholang. Is that only for that particular project?
You mean Casper resources and the Rholang files there?
Yeah.
So all of the files there are really the initial Rholang code that ends up in the Genesis block.
Uh-huh.
So this is like a basic library that you have in blockchain.
Uh-huh.
But these files are not used in the evaluator mode. So you don't have the registry and other stuff. So if you want to have registry, you can just execute your registry Rholang file inside the evaluator, and you will have registry inside the evaluator.
Okay. Okay. Oh, yeah, I saw that. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Can you say a little about your implementation for this additional function?
All right, for the additional one, sure. Let me see.
So you're on Windows, and so you cannot use IntelliJ, right?
I have a VM as well, so I'm using IntelliJ on VM. You can't use. Okay. You know, I got WSL with debugging to work, but then on WSL. But the problem is that the LMDB database APIs don't work on a WSL1. I think they work on WSL2, and because of that, I had to go off to the VM. Right, so you can do a lot of stuff on WSL, but if you have any if you're using any of the LMDB stuff, then you have to go to the VM. And then in the VM, I was you know, I was looking at trying IntelliJ and then also VS Code, because if I can use VS Code and debug in that, which you can do with Scala, then I prefer to use that.
So I don't have WSL2, and as an alternative, I use the remote access with so that I'm running my Visual Studio Code on Windows, and it's accessing a host at wholesaleinternet.com, which I pay $30 a month for, which is also running an observer node on the network. So 16 gigabytes with 4 cores.
Nice.
And I can use it for development. I have the RChain checked out there, and I'm trying to do some development, but right now I'm just modifying the transfer sign deploy Python in order to do performance testing.
Okay. Okay, so the runtime stuff was taken from Tomislav's code. So basically, to do you know, this extension for HTTP, we needed to add a few constants there, and we needed to add them to this byte name. And I think that was all there was in that file. And then in the system processes, we needed a few imports. So I'm not using serialize, so but you know, I added it, but I'm not using it right now. There's the HTTP contract, and then down here, Yeah,
sorry, I just want to ask you, you're not using serialize because, so I added serialize to also, to be able to parse JSON in Rholang, but you don't.
no,
So how do you,
the map, you just, the map handles it.
oh, so you're handling map
Well, there's two.
manually.
Yeah, I'll show you. Yeah, here is, for example, here's JSON here, right, to start the auction. Yeah. So when I call start auction up here, you know, I basically do a pattern on a hash map. I mean, on a map, right? So that's a pattern for a map, and that gives me the data from a JSON string. And then from the HTTP response, you know, so if I get back this response, what I do is I really just store it again, right? So here's the you know, this response. I just give back the JSON, right? So everything's JSON. I'm returning JSON the response. So you know, I'm just using JSON here again. But if I need to store it, so you know, for example, here I put it back into the bid store, and I put the, you know, I just basically have a key, and I put the JSON, you know, into the store, right? So I'm storing everything as JSON, and the map handles all the stuff great, and the patterns handles this great. Yeah, so I didn't need to I didn't need serialize, and then this is all. I mean, this is exactly what you had in your code, right? It's just that part. So it was like 3 changes. You know, obviously, if it's a product, it's got to be a little more robust. But it was, you know, it was that easy to be able to have Rholang call out to a service to get cryptographic functions, which is really great, right? So the question is, how can we get that as easy as that for more things, right? And not necessarily HTTP, but whatever, right? So we need like something, and JSON everywhere is great, right? It's a great format. It's very malleable, right? Then with respect to the bytes to hex, right? This was the same as, I mean, there was hex to bytes, and there was 2 UTF-8 bytes. So basically, I had to create a hex to bytes, and this is just the inverse of the bytes to hex. So you add that as a method, and then at the bottom, you add it as a method down here. Then you have to work with the costs. So there's a cost function that is called, and then the test, right? So it's just just the test that you have to work through. I think that was pretty much it.
Yeah, this should be.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, right? So, you know, adding like, you know, string functions and stuff like that, it's just, you know, it's pretty much a few places, 4 places at most that you have to touch. You know, and I don't know Scala at all, but you know, monkey see, monkey do. You can kind of, you know, mess your way through it, right?
Cool. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. If your commit gets merged, I think we should keep this a reference to this commit so people can look at it. And I was the one who asked for string functions.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the question is always going to be, I thought I had it. Is it here? Where you, yeah, there was some, trying to see where the actual cost was calculated.
Oh, it must be, so here.
Do you remember?
Go to, can you go back to reduce? we should see what are you calling there. So here is the charge. So in this file, you're calling charge with some amount. I think bytes to hex cost in bytes. So
Right.
this bytes to hex cost is the calculation.
Mm.
Can you go directly?
I think I think my VM just just stopped.
Yeah, it's doing something else.
Yeah.
One thing I'm not sure if it is mentioned in the documentation. It should be. It is also part of the compile automatic formatting. So if your code is not formatted, CI
Right.
will. So this is something that I usually have this kind of error.
My remote connection died, so sorry about that. But I think we were just talking about, what is the cost, and the cost there was just a linear relationship with the size, with the number of bytes, right? So that was an easy calculation to do. It was the same as the other ones, right?
Yeah. And also when we are adding this stuff, whatever is written, on the first time, and when it's used on the blockchain, we cannot change it, right? Because any change to that is hard fork, because right, if you want to replay the same code, you will get the different result. And so from that perspective, we just need to be aware of this, that we cannot change it. So
right.
we need to specify process, so we know exactly what we are doing.
Okay, so I guess that's all I had to share. Maybe.
Yeah, great, excellent. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Arthur. We appreciate the all your work there. So we're coming up at top of the hour at 11 o'clock. What we'll do, the other items on the agenda, we'll just forward them to next week and pick up that. Actually, Arthur, if you could stop sharing your screen, I'm just going to look at our agenda real quick.
You should be able to steal the screen share.
Oh, okay.
I think I set that option for this.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Jim. So bear with me here. So, okay. So, for IntelliJ, Tomislav, do you feel like you covered all that you wanted to? So I'm thinking in terms of so next week, as far as what we want to, what types of things we want to cover or consider covering for next week. Was there still more in IntelliJ that you wanted to go over for next week, or do you feel you covered that pretty well last week?
So I would like to not focus on only one thing. So maybe we can talk about little about IntelliJ, but also I would like to talk about directly in the code what we are using.
Okay.
So for this is for different audience, right?
Gotcha. So we'll forward these two items to next week, and yeah. So. Well, good. And one thing I'm part of the China team. So one thing we want to do, or somehow, is figure out how to repurpose these videos for the Chinese community. So I'm going to speak with Dimworm here in a couple days to get his insight. So the goal is to broaden the audience as much as we can with these education, and we will have certain challenges as far as language barriers, getting it into Chinese for all the Chinese speaking audience. So, but just so everyone knows, we're trying to expand the reach of who these these videos and the topics that we cover, who the audience is. So we're working on that as well.
So related to that is I already spoke with Will that you know we can create some kind of topics, and he can be the you know for Chinese part maybe organize or you know present something. So this is also what we can do.
Right. So okay. So thank you. And I got to keep in mind, you know, Will's a component to this as well. So let me get back with Dimworm and so yeah, coordinating that with the China team. So yeah, thanks for reminding me of that. Okay. Good. So, any other final thoughts before we finish up for today?
So
All right, well, I'd like to put in a request for going over a session going over Pi RChain. I mean, all of us have this deploy thing we have to do.
That'll be great, deploy.
yeah, and Will knows I think the most about Pi RChain, so he can talk about that.
And
Okay.
Eventually, I did not interrupt the talk, but I'm working. Basically, I developed RChain Toolkit, which I use. I am the only one to use it, I think, right now. But it's the equivalent of Pi RChain, but on Node.js. And I use it every day with all my DAPI related repositories. So basically,
That's the one that I've been looking at, Raphael. Yeah.
or take a look at it.
Yeah, I've been looking at the one from Raphael. Now is my question: do I use the one from Raphael or do I use the Pi one? But I would
I also created an API generator, so you can you know generate the JavaScript JavaScript binding with TypeScript definitions, and this is like a generator, so you can generate for every Arnold version.
Okay, great.
So this is like similar to RChain Toolkit, and so yeah, and it is a good thing that we have different different libraries for different purpose.
Yeah, great.
All right. Very good.
So I would also like to say what Raphael did with Persis and how you exchange revs. This is really great. So good work, Raphael.
Nice, cool. Is there a DApp developer tonight, later today?
Yeah, let's see here. Let me look at my calendar here. So coming up here in 1 to 2 hours is a RChain communication, and then directly following that is the DApp developer group. So yes, so that would be
Okay.
1, 2, 3, in 3 hours from now is
Okay,
the
nice.
DApp developer group. So and we don't have an agenda set for that. So whoever attends, we can figure out what we want to cover at that at the beginning of the session.
Nice. Okay, so I'll be joining maybe even the communication group.
Oh, okay. And with the RChain toolkit, is that something you wanted to speak to in the education group at some point in the future, or did you want to discuss that in the DApp developer, or were you just making it just a few comments?
It's pretty basic. Basically, these are just bindings between the HTTP API and some JavaScript ecosystem. So maybe the one from Tomislav is more complete because I don't have all the type related stuff, even though it runs on TypeScript or JavaScript. But I don't think it's worth taking time to present it. So basically, people can use it if they need to,
Gotcha.
and ask me question if they have questions.
So Rafael, you created this toolkit based on protobuf and in the first releases, right? Did you switch to HTTP or?
Yes, it's. I think the propose is the only one still on gRPC, but all the deploy, get block, and all that stuff now is plugged to HTTP.
Okay, so my API generator is fully protobuf. So it's nice that we have different
Okay.
libraries. Yeah, cool.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and look forward to our session next week. All right.
Great.
Have a great day.
Bye bye.
Yep, thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Arthur.